Our special guest tonight, Gregg Braden, and he's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie with Gregg Braden. Greg, you always say that we're in this matrix, but a lot of people aren't aware of it. They don't know how to use it. So what good is just being in it all the time?
Well, I think the answer to that question, George, is what our time in history is all about. And this, I thought we probably wouldn't get in this to the next hour, but we can do it right now. I think this
is the next hour, Greg.
Well, the conditions, the conditions we find ourselves in the world today, George, I think are pushing us to accept the responsibility that comes with knowing what we know and using our technology the way we use it in the world. I heard during our station ID a couple times. There's an interview with you, and you're referencing, and the term was being used "end times." Were the listeners hearing that as well, or was that just on my end?
Just on your end.
Oh, okay. Well, it was. I know you've had a lot of guests on who are talking about this being a very unique time in the history of our world, in the history of our civilization, and what that uniqueness means. It means different things to different people. Are we heading toward a time where things are going to change? Probably. Is that change destined to turn out one certain way? Probably not. And I think rather than looking at it as a time of end times, I think what we're looking at is a time where we individually and collectively get to find out the level of mastery that we have in this universe. It's like we've had the training wheels on for so long. And as those training wheels come off, we are discovering that this world around us is nothing more and nothing less than a mirror in this divine matrix of what we have created, consciously or not. I'm not saying everything out there is a conscious creation. I'm saying that to transcend our time in history, to survive what we see on the horizon, we've got to find out that we are not passive observers. And, George, I think it's almost universally. In the last 5 years, I've been on every continent of the earth. Not every nation, but every continent. And we've spoken to people from all over the world, sometimes directly, sometimes through translators, and they're all saying the same thing. They all sense that we have a power within us that is untapped. There's a potential.
Well, there's no question about that.
Yeah, and you explore it on this program all the time, and that's the beauty of Coast to Coast as a forum, probably the best in the world to do precisely what we're doing tonight. A big part of that power is our acceptance of the fact, and it is a scientific fact, that we each have the ability to create a quality of feeling in our hearts, not thoughts in our minds. And this is a big disconnect here in the West. That feeling that we have in our hearts is directly affecting the physical stuff our world is made of. It has a direct effect on everything from the individual healing of a body to the collective peace of a planet, to whether or not we have that war or not. In my part of the world, Native American traditions, they know, for example, when they feel the feeling as if rain has already happened, and I give this example in the book, I've seen it happen. They feel the feeling of what it feels like to stand with their feet in the mud of their Pueblo village because there's been so much rain, and they smell the smells of the rain coming off the earthen walls. And within hours, there's a rain cloud over their village. It's maybe not in the surrounding communities, but it's there. Can we prove that scientifically? Probably not right now. But what we can say is the correlations are so high that there is an effect. Just like the correlations were so high with the woman's cancerous tumor disappearing when people felt the feeling as if she was already healed, or in the case of the Lebanese-Israeli war, that the terrorist activities dropped to zero, and all the violent statistics declined during the window when people were feeling peace. All they were doing was feeling peace.
Well, why do people have to feel the peace? Why doesn't this matrix take over on its own and solve the dilemma?
Well, that's a good question, George. I don't know that I know the answer to that. It may be that what you're asking is the fundamental question of who are we and why are we in this universe.
I mean, it seems to me that our involvement in this, whatever it is critical for its success and for events to occur.
I agree. And if we're to believe the way science is a language, and it's only one language that describes our universe, and it's a relatively recent language. It's only been around for around 400 years. There are other languages that describe who we are, how our universe works, and why we're here, and some of those are over 5,000 years old. They use non-technical terms to do that. My role as a scientist, I was trained as a scientist, and I support the scientific method. And what we know is that science is incomplete. As good as it doesn't have all the answers. On the one hand. On the other hand, some of our most ancient traditions tell us how these things work, but they don't tell us why. Science gives us the mechanism, and the spiritual and indigenous traditions tell us how we use these principles in our lives. If we marry those together, George, that was my question. When the end of the Cold War, in the late 1980s, when I left Martin Marietta Aerospace, I was working on a project called the MX missile, the Peacekeeper missile. And I asked myself the question that we came so close to the brink of nuclear war on at least 3 occasions during the Cold War, closer than any of us would like to say.
And we may be even closer now.
Well, precisely. We're finding ourselves even on a more perilous place. My question was this: what happens if we marry the best science that we know today that tells us how things work with the wisdom that has worked so well, it's lasted 5,000 years and gotten us to this place? It tells us how to apply what science knows in our lives. What if we marry those two things together into a greater wisdom? What does it say to us? And what the texts have always said, and the traditions, the living traditions today, and we were 39 days in the monasteries, 12 monasteries and 2 nunneries in Tibet in August of 2005. So it's been about a year and a half since we were there.
What is it about those monks in monasteries?
Well, as a scientist, George, I was trained to look in the world around me for the answers to some of our deepest mysteries. My thinking was that we would find the clearest answers in the places that have been least disturbed by Western civilization. And the monasteries of central China and Tibet, of the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, southern Bolivia, and in the mountains, the Andes of Peru, were good candidates because they've been so some of the most isolated, rugged, magnificent, pristine places left on the earth today. I mean, you got to work to get to these places.
Oh yeah, Shangri-La. Huh?
And when you do though, this is the value. You can sit down and look at another human. You're not reading a text and speculating on what that translation may be saying, or we're not guessing at what a mural on a temple wall says. We're heart to heart, eye to eye with another human, and either directly through a translator. George, I could look at these people, beautiful people, and say, when you healed that miraculous healing that I just saw, or when you were doing these seemingly miraculous things on the outside, what did you do on the inside? How did you make that happen? How did you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty is these people have no ego, and to them, they laugh because they just assume everybody knows the world works this way.
It's normal. It's natural for them.
So the first thing to do is they giggle. They love to giggle, you know, and then they'll say, well, if you really want to know, we'll tell you. And I talk about this in the book. This was 1998. It was in the presence of an abbot that we had traveled 6 days out of Lhasa, Tibet, of over 17,000 feet above sea level to acclimate to be in this one monastery. To look at this very ancient abbot in the eyes in 98. When we went back in 95, by the way, he had died, so I'm glad we saw him when we did. I looked at him in the eyes, and through the translator, I asked him the question. I said, when we see your prayers on the outside, when we see you chanting for 14 and 16 hours a day, and we see the bells and the bowls and the gongs and the chimes and the incense on the outside, I said, what are you doing on the inside? And through the translator, he said back to me, he said, you've never seen our prayers because a prayer can't be seen. He said, what you're looking at are the things that we do to create the feeling in our body, and the feeling is the prayer. So the feeling is the prayer, not the words. And then he turned the question on me, and he said, how do you do this in your culture? And I began realizing that in our culture, when our most cherished traditions, when the New and the Old Testament were edited in the 4th century,